Okay.
Hello.
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 So this is a session which is going to be particularly focused on a generative approach to healing the racism inside of us. And this is for the Generative Coaching YouTube channel, TV channel, and we'll be recording it, and it will be then on that channel. Okay. So my name is Kathleen Dameron, and I have been running a number of workshops, a series of workshops, as opposed to one-shot workshops, around the theme of transforming white racism. So I'd just like to start out by saying, when I say transform white racism, what do you see? What comes to mind?
Fear.
Fear, okay.
Yeah, fear. And that's more to do with a feeling of guilt, I suppose.
Okay.
Shame also.
Mm. Mm.
Adrian?
And most recently, sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. You haven't finished.
Nicole, you were saying? I couldn't hear what you said there, sorry.
Yeah, because I started and then I stopped myself. Well, I think one actual very symbolic image, of course, is now the US Capitol, but it's this is already part of the problem, maybe because I'm living in Austria right now, and then it is always also very easy to transfer it somewhere else. This is always a danger that comes with this, I think.
Okay. And Adrian?
I have positive change, and if not now, when?
Okay.
And I have a little bit a curiosity, I think, for something I know in a way, but that I can feel, but it's not so much obvious in my daily life, and discomfort. And I have Get Out, the movie Get Out, in my mind.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a brief story around what is white racism. I'm going to tell you the story, and then I'm going to divide you into two groups, and I'm going to ask you to retell the story with movement, and then we're going to come back together. I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about what does it mean to be in the coach state, and how do we keep the coach state when we talk about racism. And one of the things that we know is that racism is an uncomfortable subject. And we also know that we tend to put racism in a binary situation. I'm racist or I'm not racist. But it's not binary. It's a continuum. And at the low end of the continuum, so let's say at 0 and 1, you have people who think that non-whites are subhuman. And then at the other end of the continuum, which is 12, hold on, blah. Oh, that's so interesting because it's a mirror reflection. So I see my hand going the opposite direction. So that way is 12. And when you're at 12, it's when you're actively engaged in creating equality, dignity, inclusion, social justice. So we have, all right, that's fascinating. So we have one end of the spectrum, which is 0, 1 here, and we have the other end of the spectrum, which is 12. That doesn't work. That's okay. So 1 and 12, because I have a mirror image. All right.
Okay.
So the question is, where am I along the spectrum? I can be at 0 or 1, or I can be at 12, or 5, or 6, or 7. And I could be at 5, and I'm perfectly happy to be at 5, or I could be at 5 and I desire to be at 8. And some people say, oh, no, I don't want to be at 12. 12 is too much work and too uncomfortable. Because it also depends on where your environment is. If you're at 5 and everybody around you is 12, you might feel a little backwards and uncomfortable. And if you're 5 and everybody around you is 2, you might feel uncomfortable and a little on the very liberal open side. So where you're at on the spectrum also has meaning based on the context that you're in. So one of the first steps in healing racism inside of ourselves is, where am I on the spectrum? On that spectrum, and I'm going to do it this way, that spectrum between 0 and 12, where am I? And where do I want to be? And where is my environment? So that is what we're going to be looking at. How do I create comfort? So when we start to feel uncomfortable, how does it feel in your body when you feel uncomfortable? What are your signs? How do you know?
I feel contraction in my shoulders.
Okay.
My chest area, it feels restricted.
Okay. Nicole?
I feel tight around the solar plexus, or sometimes also the throat area, depending on if it's about speaking up or this thing of I can or I cannot, more around the solar plexus. Yeah.
Judith?
And I feel it like a tightness around my chest that then impacts on how I'm breathing.
Okay. So question number 2 is, what do you do to come out of that crash state and to go to a more centered, open, aware, connected state? What do you do?
Yeah, exactly. I breathe.
You breathe.
Yeah. And I consciously relax my shoulders.
Do you shake it off?
Yes, sometimes, yeah.
Shake it off. You know, a lot of researchers have said that one of the well-known ones, Peter Levine, said, you know, to shake it off, shake it off. Okay. What do you do for your solar plexus?
Sorry?
What do you do for your solar plexus?
Yeah, I mean, I do energy work then, meaning that I go through the chakras, in different ways. Sometimes I do Qigong, and that includes breath work as well as you said, shaking it off, for example.
Okay.
And so I always try to do it holistically and not only focus then on the solar plexus because it's connected anyways.
Okay. And Julian?
It depends on where I am, to be honest. If I'm working, I do try and figure out from breathing from my belly button to actually sit up and as you say, shake it out. If I was on my own, I would actually be bouncing around the kitchen to music because that allows me to just release some of that stuff.
Okay. So we've got breathing, we've got Qigong, we've got shaking it off, bouncing around to music,
Singing. also.
singing. I'm going to introduce humming. Okay. So when we're going to be going into talking about white racism and the origins of white racism, I want you to play for one another the role of guardian, which is really observing the other person. And when they look like they're not, you know, in their relaxed, open way, that you can breathe or shake it off or hum. And so when I'm going to put you in the room where there are two of you, I'd like you to give each other, what are your codes? What works for you? And what do I look like when I'm relaxed and open and just really present? And what do I look like when I'm kind of like beginning to shut down because this doesn't feel comfortable? Or, yeah, okay. Oh, your solar plexus is getting tight. And I'm going to tell you the story, and we're going to practice now how we look really open as we take this story in. And then we're going to retell the story. All right. So can we see everybody when you're kind of like upset and this is like not comfortable? Can we see what you look like? Okay. So we're calibrating. You see everybody, okay? And now when you're kind of like open and curious and compassionate. Okay, so can you calibrate what everybody looks like? Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, take notes. I've got about 5 minutes of story to tell you. And then you'll go into separate rooms to tell the story and mime it. So, when we talk about racism, and when we talk in particular about white racism, what we're referring to, in fact, is something that started 500 years ago. In 1493, there was something which was called the Edict of Discovery. So can you imagine the highest moral authority of the time, the Pope, highest moral authority in the Christian world, says to all of the European Christian kings and queens that any country, any land that you discover that does not belong to Christianity, which is not ruled by Christian rulers, any non-Christian lands you can take them over. You can make them yours. You can take the land, the fruit of the land, the people on the land, the lives of the people on the land, and the fruit of their labor. And that was called the Edict of Discovery. So just imagine the highest moral authority, your highest spiritual authority says you can go rob, steal, kill, rape, genocide, if they're not Christian. So how does that feel in your bodies? Keep breathing. So this is 1493. And one of the things that happens is that Prince Henry the Navigator of Portugal, remember in 1492, they have kicked out the Moors. But when they kicked out the Moors, they lost access to sugar, which was in Mesopotamia, and spices and silk. So they're trying to find a route around, sailing around Africa, because they can no longer go across land to get there. And Prince Henry the Navigator also discovers that the sale of Black bodies as slaves to the New World was very lucrative. Why did they need slaves in the New World? Because the Europeans discovered the New World in 1492. And in the first 20 years, they had killed over 60% of the Native American population. They killed them through forced labor, and they also killed them through measles, chickenpox, and smallpox, because the Native Americans had no resistance. They didn't have any antibodies against these diseases, and so they were wiped out by them. They needed labor in the New World. The local labor was disappearing. And so they started to bring over Blacks. And it was incredibly lucrative. The Portuguese crown made more money on the sale of Black slaves to the New World than they had made on all the other taxes they had in Portugal at the time. So they had a very juicy market. And so you will see they begin this slave trade. And then it begins to change. And instead of just being non-Christian, because at the same time you had monks who were saying, wait a minute, this is what they're doing to the Native American population is terrible and horrible. And you had the monks who were saying, these people have souls and we have to do something and you can't do this. And the monks were converting them to Christianity. So we change from Christianity to the color of the skin. And Prince Henry the Navigator actually asks a friend of his to tell the story of the hierarchy of races. At the top of the hierarchy, European white people. And you will see that over time, there were Europeans that were included, excluded, but it's European white people. Just under them, Asians. The European whites are intelligent, cultivated, civilized, Christian, and industrious. The Chinese are kind of spacey. They've got something a little spiritual. They are industrious, but they need, of course, to be managed. The Native Americans, they have contact with the earth. They're the noble savages. And the Blacks, well, They are strong physically and they're strong sexually. And all of these other races need to be controlled and managed by the whites so that the fruit of their lands is made productive. Or you could say, so we could steal it. What's fascinating is that that hierarchy of races that is put into place in the early 1500s, the contours of it have stayed with us for 500 years. We have added to it. There was a period where they were adding to it with all sorts of philosophical reasonings. Then we started adding to it by measuring people's skulls and doing all sorts of tests to prove that this hierarchy of races is absolutely true. Everybody stretch. Come on, everybody stretch. Yay. Mm. And it's a question of our curiosity. Our curiosity. We've heard so often about racism. Isn't it nice to explore where it comes from, the origins, and as it unfolds through history? And so, in the 1500s, this philosophy, the justification, at the same time in the 1500s, they're making lots of money off of this. You begin to see cities like Liverpool and like Bordeaux, which become incredibly wealthy more and more. And when you get into the 1600s, and the 1600s really begins to be the time when it gets written into law. So it isn't until 1619 that in the United States, you have the first writing about a white race. So the white race has not always existed. The white race. And slowly, the white race comes into existence and becomes codified as better, as having different rights. And you begin to see they shouldn't intermarry between races. And the system becomes institutionalized. It becomes in the laws. It becomes in the institutions. And all through the 1600s, the 1700s, the 1800s, it's a very profitable business, racism. It profits some people. And if you're poor and white, at least you're not Black, you're not Asian. You have that. And there are times where you had poor Blacks and you had poor whites in the United States, in England. But the whites would not side and come together with the Blacks. They did many times, but it was always broken because the whites had more rights. Not a lot more, but a little more. So we see that over time, racism becomes an institution. And you also have in racism this wonderful justification at each time. So for example, why did Europe colonize Africa? Because we brought them roads and schools. And then you have cognitive dissonance. Do you really think that there were no schools in Africa before the Europeans arrived? Really? Think about it. So we talk about cognitive dissonance because if we stopped and thought about it, we would say, no, that's not true. So racism is also, it's something that I've learned. I've learned from my parents, I've learned from school, I've learned from the stories that people tell, from books, from novels, from movies. And so we know that at 5 years old, a Black child knows, when given the choice between a white doll and a black doll, that the white doll is prettier and nicer and more developed. So when we talk about white racism, it's inside white people, but it's inside Blacks, Asians, and Native Americans. The company L'Oreal would tell you that they sell most of their products in Asia and in Africa with whitening ingredients, because what's right is right. And what's right is beautiful. And so even in Asia, to be light with white features and white hair, white colored hair, a little blondie, that is so much better. And the same is true in Africa. So that's the end of the story. Any questions? Okay, how are your bodies feeling? Does it trigger something uncomfortable, the story?
It triggers my lack of knowledge and my lack of seeking that knowledge until quite recently.
How did it feel in your body?
There's a tightness up here, but the tightness is about not a headache, but it's about focus, I suppose, a focused. Yeah. I'm quite tight around my neck, my mouth, jaw.
Okay, so Nicole, what would you suggest to Fiona to get her neck back?
I think neck always connects also to jaw. So it's good to do something like okay, and it's always also good to how do you say in English, like the to
Shrug the shoulders, shrug, shrug, shrug.
you can really I'm sorry, now my lack in English is
I'll say it in German.
so do this and then just let it fall, you know, really like making it even tighter and then you release it again. And maybe also shake it off. Like that's always good. Yeah.
Why is it important what I'm asking you to do about how does it feel in your body, and then asking you to go to comfort? Why is this important?
Open.
We could be a bit more receptive
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to just blocking out in the crash state.
Yeah.
And
In the
also
crash state, you don't remember.
Sorry. I was also thinking about this is the way to get rid of patterns, of body patterns that let you stay also in a certain, maybe narrow mind road, or how to call it. Yeah.
And I was talking, the title is talking about healing the racism inside of you. So it's an uncomfortable subject. We don't talk about it. So as a process, I want you to feel that it's uncomfortable. And at the same time, when you feel it's uncomfortable, you don't push it down and say, no, go away, stop. You say, oh, I feel tense here. Let me just go back to, because my objective is that you'll learn to feel that this is a very ugly, painful story. And I can feel that and I can hold it without going into crash. When we go into crash, we don't want to do it again. And we don't remember. There's fight, flight, freeze. However, if we can feel it, if we can be in contact with our empathy, if we can be in contact with our curiosity, which means more centered and open, we hold what's uncomfortable. We don't push it away. We welcome it. We hold it so it has an opportunity to integrate. So I just wanted you to understand the why behind what we're doing. We're taking the time to feel the story. We're taking the time to notice how it feels, put ourselves back into centered, open, connected. And if that's uncomfortable, we can feel the discomfort without suffering because the body's relaxed, and we can integrate it. We can have sympathy for it. I can have sympathy without being in the suffering of empathy. And the more able we are to hold it, then the more we'll be able to talk about racism. So I have put you into two what we call affinity groups. So Fiona and Nicole are together, and Doodle and Adrien are together. And your task, dun, 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 is I'm going to give you 10 minutes to retell the story, and you're going to retell the story with mimes. So, physically retell the story and not retell the story like that. And you can decide that you want to tell the story to someone who is at 6 on the spectrum. Or you can decide you want to tell the story to someone who is 4 on the spectrum. So 1, 0 and 1 is the people who think that non-whites are subhuman, and 12 are the people who are actively working towards justice, equity, equality, dignity, and inclusion. And you can say, oh, I'd rather tell the story to someone who I think already knows about it, or someone who doesn't know about it, who's open, or, oh, I want to walk on the wild side. I want to tell the story to someone who really doesn't want to hear this story. Okay. And you have 10 minutes. So we will come back together in 10 minutes. And I'm going to let you get started, and then I'll pop in your rooms. And when I pop into your rooms, I won't be listening to the content of your story. I'm just going to be checking that your bodies look open and curious. And if they're not, I'm going to say, hey, guardians, bring your guardians out.
May I ask a question again? So
Yes.
within those 10 minutes, one person tells it to the other, and then vice versa? So
You
5
can
minutes.
decide, you can decide, I'll start and I'll tell the beginning, and then you tell a part, and
Okay.
so you're not both going to tell the whole story. Both of you will tell one whole story. You will not tell 2 whole stories. So you say, I do this part, you do that part, or we can make part of it a dialogue. It's one performance. Any other questions? Okay. So have fun. Okay, so before we have showtime, how was it for your bodies?
Liberating. I
Okay.
think, yeah, to get some playfulness into that, and yeah, some groove too.
Okay.
I would certainly agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, Nicole and Fiona. Fiona, you are muted.
When I moved, it helped me get out of my head a little bit and not. Yeah, there was a lot of needing to get away from here. So as I moved and used my voice a lot, actually, quite loud, quiet, loud variation.
Yeah, I think for me, I don't know. Sometimes I have still this divide. On the one hand, I'm coming from dance and body work and from movement, and I'm used to, if I'm reflecting things, I'm usually also always going back and forth. But in this situation, I might have again like dissociated. So staying in my head on the one hand, becoming like very, knowing and intellectual about it, and forgetting to move. So yeah, I think that happened once again.
Yeah. So the healing is this ability to feel it, to move, and then something happens and it integrates and it releases. And then it's not a fun story, but you can, as you guys said, you can relax into feeling it and go for this epic story. So who begins?
I can volunteer you, Adrian. You had the first half of the story and I had the second half.
Okay.
Who begins what?
You're gonna start the story and I'm gonna finish it off.
Yes.
Oh, we do it again?
Yes.
So, but
Yes.
with-
It's
yeah.
showtime. We're gonna enjoy your story.
Okay. So I will stand up. So I begin. Okay. Let me just see myself if I'm in the screen. Okay. So yeah, in 1493, there was this the Pope at that time. He made an edict about the discovery of lands, and the main idea was that if the land is not Christian, if there is no Christianity in it, the people are not Christian, the white people that will discover, the Christian people that will discover the lands have the right to take it and take everything that is inside it. People, animals, fruits, everything. So it was very interesting for example, the Portuguese, because the Portuguese had, I think, a little conflict with Mesopotamia. And so they lost their access to sugar, to spices, and they were craving more resources. So they decided to turn around Mesopotamia and go into Africa, where they discovered the Black people, strong, powerful, vital, and they had the great idea to take them and put them in America or other land, South or North America, for labor, because there was a big lack of labor, because they have killed many of the natives that were inhabiting here the lands. I think that's where I stop. Okay.
Okay, right. Okay. So, problem. If they went to all these different countries and they weren't Christian, but they converted to Christianity, well, what would happen then? You can't take Christians and their souls. So they thought of an idea. Bing! White people were superior. Yeah. Brown-skinned people, not so good, but not so bad. Natives, yeah, okay. But Black people, no, 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 no. They were strong, but stupid. They couldn't read, they couldn't write. Nah. Black people, down. And then they would ask questions, but still they would say, white, fantastic. Black, stay back. I might be poor, ooh, but I'm white, ooh. I don't want to know about Black people. I'm still white. So there I will stay, because I'm champion. That's why we have racism today, 500 years later. What was that, Adrian? We said it was a burden. Burden. If you're white, it's a burden. If you're Black, it's a burden. Now we release it. Please. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Jean.
So how did the story feel?
How did it feel to us?
Yes.
Or
Well,
To
how did it
us
feel to
too.
you, the storytellers, and then how did it feel to us, the story receivers?
I think actually it was I thought it was quite releasing when we were doing it. I thought so, because we were both okay physically, weren't we? I think so, because when we checked, we were, yeah, we're open, we can do this.
Yeah, there is a lot of energy, I think, in the body. That for me, it's a signal that my body is ready to handle and to integrate the story. And here, I think I can handle more stories. So if you're ready.
And you know, I don't know if I said this to you at the time, Adrian, but at the beginning it was like, but at the end he was smiling.
Yeah.
He was smiling at the end. That was good.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, Adrian, did you also watch Judeline while speaking and performing?
I saw she was mimicking my gestures.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I wasn't, because the screens are very little, so I had a overview of you.
Yeah, there's a part of me that loved Julien's mime when she was very Catholic, and then she says, "Idea, ta-da, great
Bing,
idea.
bing, something, yes.
Yeah, make it the color of the skin." Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it became entertaining to an extent where I shortly thought, oh, is that allowed? Yeah, because it made me laugh, in a way. And we know that laughter releases also body tension on the one hand. But yeah, I also had this moment of, oh, wow, and am I allowed to go there? Or yeah, I have to say.
It was a brilliant idea. Make it the color of the skin. That they can't change. You can't convert the color of the skin. Yay. Yeah. So you can feel they found the perfect justification. And how does that feel? How's your solar plexus?
Yeah. Not right. So yeah, quite tight.
Can I say, I'm gonna, maybe my language is a bit more colorful, but I say you sneaky bastard for thinking that up.
Yeah.
Sorry, excuse my
language. Okay, it's showtime.
Okay. Do you want to go in the same order as before? Nicole?
I don't know right now.
Okay, so let's put her in our.
Okay.
That was a question.
Maybe we could do Schnick, Schnack, Schnuck, as you say in German.
Oh, the roll a dice.
Yeah.
I haven't got a dice.
So,
shake it off, shake it off, shake it off.
So how did racism and white racism especially come along? In 1493, an edict was created by the Pope. The Pope being this moral and high moral and spiritual figure with the authority to influence following Christians that they should take over other countries and turn them into Christian countries if they haven't been before. So, and with this also oh my God, the justification of robbing people of their land, stealing the fruits of their land from them, killing them. Yes, was justified, as I already said. So, and it was connected to discovery, to discovering other countries. And when the Portuguese, who were about to become one of the big colonizing countries, when they kicked out the Moors, which happened quite simultaneously, they realized that they have no supplies of sugar anymore or spices. So they searched for ways how to come into the possession of those. And at the same time, when they arrived in countries, they also brought diseases with them, like chickenpox, which the indigenous people weren't immune against. So within 2 years, 60% of the population was dead, was killed. And this is where the very profitable idea of bringing Black bodies from African countries to the so-called new world came into play. The beginning of the transatlantic slave trade. But it was monks who started to preach against that and to say, those are also human souls. You can't just go and rob people, steal from them, and not kill them. So conscience started to awake. And so what we white people needed was a different kind of argumentation, because this missionary idea of bringing Christian faith to others couldn't work anymore. Okay, yeah. Yeah.
So there was a hierarchy that became a dominant idea.
Yes.
And in the top of this hierarchy, the white Europeans were superior. They were elegant, they were cultured, they spoke languages. And they decided that they were far the better to be at the top of this pyramid. And a little bit below were the Asians, who were useful. They were manageable. Then there was the Native Americans, who were very noble and connection with the earth. Then at the bottom of this pyramid were the blacks. They were strong physically and very sexual, but all of these needed to be controlled in order to have productivity. They needed to be productivity, and the land needed to be managed. So all these layers of this pyramid underneath the white Europeans had to be managed. And various processes were put into place in order to manage them. And in doing this, there was propaganda, there were models, there were suggestions that if you were non-white, then you were needed to be managed and controlled. In the 1690s, in the 1619s, it was written into law, this notion of white race. And from that time onwards, there is this notion that the white is superior. And this becomes into law, and there's this sense of superiority, and racism is born as a notion. And there was no mixture, there was no mixing of the races. So through the 16, 17, 1800s, racism is very, very profitable. Loads of money. And if you weren't white, then life was hard. There was propaganda in the movies, there was propaganda through education, through economics, that if you were non-white, you worked. If you were white, you were the management and you had control. Even to be poor white, it was better to be white than to be a poor black, because poor whites had rights. Blacks had no rights at all. So racism becomes institutionalized. And then the term cognitive dissonance. So the scientists got involved in this picture and created experiments to prove the fact that non-whites were inferior and whites were superior. And this notion, aspects of it continues. And then this very uncomfortable statement for me: what's white is right, and what's right is beautiful.
Okay. How does that feel? Storytellers, how does it feel in your bodies?
I'm tired. I feel
Yeah,
it.
I mean,
I feel exhausted. We switched, and
What makes you feel exhausted?
there's a weight. There's a weight. I think I've been describing a weight as in heaviness, not as in time. Maybe as in time. It felt quite hard to be light about it. How would I have done it, trying to be lighter? I suppose I tried to move when yeah. We took different roles, Nicole. Because when we did it first time around, we had reversed the order.
Nicole, how's your body feeling? How's your solar plexus?
Yeah, I think tight, not totally tight and tense, but so in the middle, I would say. And I feel like I failed myself because I have an issue with speaking in English in a public or semi-public situation like that. And when it's showtime somehow, then I become excited, and then this lack of words starts. And this also interfered then with the topic that we are somehow working on, where I felt it was partly connected to it, but partly it is a topic of mine, and also with other topics, you know. So I felt a bit ashamed about my lack of words, and I could have gotten into movement, but somehow I didn't. I could have mimicked it more, maybe, or mimed it, but somehow I didn't. And this doesn't feel well or good. I mean, yeah.
So what do you need to do to feel good in your body again?
To eat some cake, I guess.
One option is cake.
A karaoke session, and la 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 la, you know, and dancing.
Yes.
Yeah, rah, 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 rah. Yeah.
Do this. How about this? How does that feel?
Good.
In the language of resolving trauma or healing trauma, this self-hugging is a very good tool. It helps your nervous system calm down. And how are you feeling now? Her face has changed, noticed?
Yeah, more released. Not totally, because you hear the jaw is but I should have been going for gibberish before, I think. I'm always between language.
Or you could do scat singing. You could do scat. Scat.
Sorry?
Scat.
Scat?
Boom, boom,
Yeah.
ba, hey, boom, ba, sha. Boom, ba, bing, ba, boom, ba, bing, hey, da, ba, boom, boom, ba, ding, ba, ding. Yeah. It's gibberish with a little more rhythm. Okay. How are you feeling now?
Much better. My humor also came back. That's important.
Why do you think I'm paying particular attention that everybody's body comes back into the centered and open and coach state?
Because we don't want to be stuck there.
Why? What's
Because if you're stuck in that place, then you're not able to embrace, hear, listen, connect, if you like that.
Yeah. And so one advantage is that when your body is open, you actually receive the message.
Mm-hmm.
You can take it in.
Yeah.
And the other is because talking about race is not easy. And it's uncomfortable. And because it's uncomfortable, we don't want to do it. You want to do something uncomfortable? No, so we avoid it, we stay away from it. And so how can we feel it Or as I said, how can you see it, hear it, feel it, hold it, hold it. So I can hold it. I'm not making it go away. I'm not running away from it. I'm not justifying it. I'm not defending. It's just there and I'm there with it. Oh, and I'm holding something that's uncomfortable, but okay. And that's a healing process. So I said, how do we heal this racism in us? This is the first step, is to be able to heal it enough that we can talk about it. Heal it enough that I can tell the story. I know it, I can tell it. I can tell it to somebody else. And we tend to avoid that which is uncomfortable and unpleasant.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not about making it a beautiful story. It's about telling an unpleasant story in a way that I am comfortable enough to hold the unpleasant story and tell it. And for me, that's the first step we have in dealing with our internal racism, is that we can tell the story, we can tell what's happened. We can talk about what has happened and what is happening. Otherwise, you have the phenomena, which is very common, is people don't know. I don't know, but I don't want to know. So as a society, we don't know. Because as a society, we don't want to know. So not only is this a healing process for you individually, but the more people can talk about it, the more it becomes easy in society to talk about it. So you're contributing to something for yourself, but you're also contributing to something for the community. And on top of that, we know that once upon a time, we thought that no one could run, was it run a mile faster than a certain time? But the minute somebody else did it, other people started doing it. We have these societal limits that we believe. And when people start to break through those limits, suddenly it becomes possible for more people. So the more we are able to hold the story and tell the story, we're also contributing to going past this unconscious limit that we have, that we don't know the story, we can't tell it. So I'll end by inviting you to be a guardian of your well-being so that you can stay in your coach state and see and hear and feel and hold this unpleasant story so that we can heal racism. So if I could just hear in one or two words, what did you get out of this time we've spent together?
Connection for me.
There's a connection for me about moving in memory. Yeah.
Grounding for me. Grounding. I feel grounded when I tell this story, and then when I hear it. It wasn't the case.
yeah, to stick with the connection of movement and intellect and this kind of storytelling, for sure. Yeah. To consciously connect feelings to thoughts.
So if you want to know more about transforming white racism, you can send me an email at transformwhiteracism@gmail.com. And I run workshops, and I also have a community platform where you can explore more about stories and videos and how do we heal the trauma. So to transform white racism, it's in white bodies, it's in Asian bodies, it's in Black bodies, and it's a 500-year-old habit. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. And I'm very humbled, Adrienne and Nicole, how you managed to communicate with us, knowing that, you know, especially Nicole, thank you so much for your perseverance, and thank you. Thanks, Fiona, seeing you again.
See
Thank you,
again.
Kathleen.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
and-
Stay safe, everyone.